What's up, guys? Our Wrestling Podcast back at you with another episode. This is Dave Vicious, along with Just the Total Package, and Craig the British Bulldog, bringing you our perspective on the world of professional wrestling. No inside sources, no ties to the industry, just stories from the diehards, sharing opinions with you. Today's topic, Macho Man Legacies Revisited. For audio fans, give us a listen on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio, or watch our videos on YouTube at Our Wrestling Channel, and check out exclusive content on Daily Motion at Our Wrestling Podcast, and on social media. Can you give us a follow on Instagram at O.W.P 2019 or on Facebook at Our Wrestling Podcast? If you're old and senile and watching Fox News, you can catch us there. Jess, somebody wants to say hello to you because he's got the cup of coffee. He's got the cream rising to the top. You know, one of my favorites. I believe I got this as a gift.
Randall.
Hi, Randy. I have this shirt too.
I've always been better than you, brother. I've always been better than you. So we're gonna Randy fight.
Cup of coffee in the big time.
20 years ago, at TNA Turning Point 2004, 20 years ago was Randy Savage's last televised match. And it was bad, and it sucked that he went out that way. And so I was watching that because that's been, you know, they revisit anniversary stuff a lot on the Conrad podcast, and of course Jarrett owned TNA here, and they were talking about it and how negotiations broke down and it sucked, and just kind of sucked the way Savage went out, and that was his last televised match, and you didn't really see him on any wrestling platform until he got announced for one of the years of the WWE video games, and then they started to reconcile, it seemed, and then he passed away, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so we were never able to see Macho Man alive go into the Hall of Fame and, kind of come back home. He never came back for anything after. A lot of people, say it was because of some stuff that happened. And, the reason why he left WWF the first time, it's that whole Stephanie McMahon rumor. That's stupid. But it's more of just, I think that Randy Savage was super prideful. We've already done a legacy on him. It was a two-parter, but it was really back in the infancy of the podcast. It was way before video. So I was like, man, 20 years ago was his last match. Like, wow. Like, I wish Macho Man had a better ending, like, in wrestling. So for somebody who is such a big part of wrestling and somebody who I put on my Mount Rushmore and somebody who should be talked about more, and they're just not, and I don't know why. The impact that he had with his Intercontinental title reign, the relevancy of him being the first champion after Hogan's dominant 4-year reign, and everything that Macho Man did for pro wrestling,
and still drawing money after Hogan too. By the way,
he and even though he went to WCW and revitalized his career and had a great feud with DDP, and was part of the NWO and everything, like Macho Man is just one of the best to ever do it. And so I like to go back sometimes, especially with the stuff that we did audio only and no video, and talk about some of these legacies revisited. And me thinking this week, God, it's been 20 years since his last match. Like, God damn it. Like, just someone that will never be able to get in the Hall of Fame and speak his piece and tell his stories from his mouth and everything. But, Macho was fantastic. And, a lot of people don't talk about his WCW run. It's all hinged around, because that was the Mega Powers and the WWF, and his first title reign and everything, was significant. And I'm not saying we shouldn't celebrate that, because he was awesome. But, his WCW run was great too, and I think I yada-yada'd past a lot of it in our other legacy. We talked about the DDP feud. He had a brief feud with Sting. He kind of, did revisit his feud with Hogan, and we were there live at one of the events when, Hogan came down wearing that wig, and then Macho put it on at Halloween Havoc or whatever, and made everybody laugh or whatever. It was like, I remember a lot of things that Macho did. Him and Elizabeth reunited in WCW, and that was really cool to see, because it was a throwback to what we grew up with. But yeah, Macho is wonderful, and I hate the way he went out. And even Jeff talking, like on the podcast, like, man, yeah, it just really sucked that things broke down. And things broke down because of Hogan. Again, like, Hogan started negotiating with
TNA.
Yes, Hogan started negotiating with TNA at the time, and then I guess Randy was like, if he's going to be a part of this, but Hogan was only using it to get leverage against Vince, and he re-signed for some more matches with Vince. And everybody knew that's what he was doing, but Savage hated Hogan so much towards the end that he's like, I'm out if you're going to even entertain bringing him over. And so it sucked, like, that's the way Savage's TNA bout ended. And then Jeff talked about Savage, especially when he was swole, he would always wear tank tops, showing off his guns, always, because he wanted to go around the locker rooms and show everyone he was still in shape or whatever. When he came to TNA, he looked noticeably slimmer, and he wore long sleeve black shirts and always wore big trench coats and never let anybody like see. So people were like suspicious that Savage wasn't looking well either at that time.
Could it be? Oh my God! You are kidding me! We'll see you Wednesday and Thursday on Best Day. We'll see you Friday on Impact. But you can't miss Turning Point. My God, the Macho Man Randy Savage. Randy Savage is in Victory Road.
So, which sucked because when you get off roids, I hate to say it, towards the end of his run in WCW, he was back on the gas big time and didn't look comfortable, didn't look healthy, had major hip problems because of that elbow drop. So I don't know. I wanted to just revisit and talk about Savage. For some odd reason, one of my favorite stretches was '88 when Hogan left for a while, and I remember like a Saturday Night's Main Event where he took on One Man Gang, and I don't know why I remember that specific Saturday Night's Main Event a lot, like in Macho Man, and then he fought Andre. A lot of people don't talk about his title defenses that he did when Hogan was gone. He took on Andre on Saturday Night's Main Event, One Man Gang. Especially the Andre stuff was really fun, and then you hear later that Andre never liked him in a locker room. But it was really cool to go back and watch. I watched some of the stuff of Savage today too, some of his older things, and it's just fun to see him. His IC title reign will still be one of my favorites. Like I know it was nostalgia because I was young and all that stuff when he was Intercontinental Champion. But it's like I really loved his stuff with Santana. I loved his stuff with Steamboat, of course. There were so many other cool things that he did. His matches with Hogan on the house shows when Hogan was world champion and Savage was IC champion was awesome. So many cool things about Randy. So many awesome things.
Put on him now. Look at it. What's he doing now, Jess? Look at Savage going down into his tights. He's got something in his hand. He missed it. He missed with it. Oh, look at this. Oh, he didn't miss that time. He drove that right into Santana's face.
We got a new champion.
I can't believe it.
We got a new Intercontinental champion, Monsoon.
Look at that. He just threw it outside the ring, Jess. Whatever it was.
Yeah, I think when you talked about the long sleeves and the trench coats, Randy would even do that in the IC title run into this WWF run because even though he was in peak phenomenal shape, he wasn't as big as Hogan. Hogan probably had 60 pounds on him, at that time, and Hogan Macho would always come down draped in something bigger, like he would have the long tassels and the long capes to make him look, phenomenally bigger. He always would try to find ways to make himself look bigger. But what's even funnier about it was his smaller stature and size in those moments actually called for better matches. The match with Steamboat, we all say at WrestleMania 3, stills the show. 20 plus 2 counts, right, Jess? You probably know the exact number. I always forget. But it had more 2 counts in a main event than we can ever recall. And it's a fantastic match. And people go back to that match all the time for just ring psychology and how a match should tell a story. And compared to Hogan Andre, which was a spectacle, which put people in the seats, that's where everybody goes back and goes, this was the match of the night. And it's a Macho Man personified match. Macho would also be very, very specific in major matches and call people to his place and say, let's go over it again, move by move by move. It was so important to him that they didn't miss anything to tell the story in the match. And I think that's, to your point, Jess, is what what shows Macho as a Hall of Famer and a lot of people's, Mount Rushmores, because he did take that kind of time. He was painstaking with it. It really mattered to him, and he loved the industry. Talking about DDP, they were having Macho go over match after match after match. And he said one night, like, let's try DDP going over, and the crowd blew up in a house show. And Macho's like, well, I guess we're doing that at the pay-per-view. Macho didn't even care. It wasn't like about a loss of the paper. He's like, what's gonna make money? And Macho always understood that and didn't care if DDP got over. It was due. And when they tested at a house show one time after like 30 times of DDP just looking up at the lights, and DDP's always very thankful for that. He's like, he put me over. He didn't put himself first, and he put me over because it was best for business at the time, because I was coming up and getting over.
Everyone's watching this. It is on. He got him. He hooked him, boys. He hooked him. That's it. That's it. This place has erupted. Everyone is standing. Savage, when you thought he had Diamond Dallas had Savage. And look at Nick Patrick.
The pressure's on him right now, Brain. He knows he's not going to get up.
Come on, Patrick.
Count him. Go ahead. You better count.
Come on.
1, 2, 3.
He got him. He got him. Is Nick Patrick back or what?
A lot to say about Macho. I think that could be easily forgotten. And to your point, maybe the audio didn't tell that story because back in those days we would go line by line about everything they ever did and just kind of tell the story of what matches they had. But no one talks about the inside of that and where Macho was like, let's do this because this just makes sense. It's time for me to put DDP over because it's gonna make a ton of money.
Yeah. There's a couple of things about Macho. Macho Man's like legacy is almost in that like top 5 of wrestlers now, almost like approaching more like relevant and beloved than Hogan because there's so much kind of macho nostalgia now, and there's so many memes about like the Macho verse, and you see all those accounts of just people being Macho Man all over the place.
Yeah.
His Slim Jim stuff, like he never had the big movies, or a movie star, but at least he had absolute like mainstream appeal. And he was one of the first guys to, in a land of giants, kind of be given the heavyweight belt, right? Like, so with Hogan's and Flair's and Andre's, like he could have been a cruiserweight really. And he had a great run and a solid main event kind of push. From his icy stuff to, I always loved him. And he always kind of, I know he had an ego in the back and he was never, I guess he never had enough clout as Hogan or Flair or anybody or Warrior. Because he certainly lost a lot the last X years of his career and through the WCW phase. But like,
Well,
you want to talk
weird.
about charisma and
Yeah, because whenever he got in there with Hogan, like Hogan muddied the water all the time because he's a bitch.
Yeah.
Like, so Hogan always like fucking held him down. It's weird. It's like I felt like it goes Hogan holding the Warlord down and then Hogan holding Randy Savage down. Like he always did. I always felt like Randy always shined when he was left alone, and Hogan did the Mega Power storyline, one of the greatest storylines ever told in wrestling.
Yes.
There's no doubt. And I still like the WrestleMania 5 match. I thought it was fine for what it was. But I mean, like, yeah, and then they make Macho Man get the King's crown after that. He fucking turns that into gold because he's talented. And like, they fucking stick him with Zeus. He's got to handle Zeus. And like, it's just, like Macho Man did all the dirty work that Hogan didn't want to do.
Really
everything. Everything Hogan said, no, that doesn't work for me, brother.
What a good point that you brought up, Zeus, because to your point, he had to hold his hand through all that shit. And it was Tiny, right? It was what they called him.
Yeah, Tiny Zeus Lister.
Tiny was like throwing fake punches because he was like, well, in the movies, you don't actually touch anybody. He's like, well, you gotta touch me, man. You gotta lay it in. Like, and Macho Man was responsible for all that. Hogan's like, I'm gonna go talk to Vince for a while. It's like, come on, man. Like, yeah, Macho had to take care of all of that. Like, so dumb. Like,
I've got me, not a wrestler, but a brawler. Sensational Fury. Right now, tell the entire world who the human wrecking machine is. Zeus is the human wrecking machine, and he's got the madness in his eye.
that's definitely a short end of the stick, Jazz. I forgot all about that. Like, he had to handle that guy. Him and Sherry had to handle him. Like,
he could
and how
also announce
ridiculous is
too. Like everything he could do. He was great promo, great ring.
And
He
it
was a
sucked
lot of
because
fun.
I know that we want to praise him on this
Mhm.
too, but JR unfortunately has a lot of negative things to say because by the time he got in the commentary, he didn't like Jim Ross Savage because he felt like Jim Ross you're just fast talking, you're just trying to like make me look like the dumb. He was super paranoid, Randy. By that time,
Yes,
and
he was.
He was normally, but especially after he and Liz divorced and all that, and like that 93, 94 commentary era, he said he just had a lot of bad times with Macho Man because Macho Man would get to the studio, where they're gonna do like overlays for superstars and stuff, and he would just be in a bad mood, and then like he would say Jim Ross would say something, and they would stop recording, and Macho Man would turn to him, and be like, "You trying to make an asshole out of me, or what are you trying to do?" Like, and he's like, "No." He's like, "You talking to me like I'm 4?" Like, and like Jim Ross is like, "I'm just fucking calling the match, man. Like, I don't understand. Like, Yeah, and it was just like, it was bad. JR was like, I love his in-ring work, and I love Macho Man, and I will never say anything negative about him, but he's like, my experience with him for that 2 years sucked because
So
like he was just
I don't know, Connie. I just never clicked with him, but I refused to allow that to interfere with my daily duties in administration. Because you don't be an idiot. You'd be an idiot not to see the star power. He's Randy Savage, for God's
Of
sake.
course, yeah.
So I wasn't going to go against my team, and because I didn't personally get along with him. He was Vince's guy. He was always very close to
years
Vince.
sucked because like he was just
Wow.
he was mad that Vince put him there. He was paranoid. He was divorcing Liz. Yeah, he was hard to work with, but a lot of geniuses are. I'm not saying Macho never did anything political to hurt anybody. He might have been in bad moods, like which everyone gets that way. Especially high profile business guys or talent or whatever. Like so, you never hear bad stories of like he was trying to. I mean, in the Warriors, his best match was against Randy, arguably. Like
100%.
I mean, some people might say WrestleMania 6 because it was a higher profile, but I mean, like WrestleMania 7, the year later, like Warrior and Savage's match was really good, and that was because of Macho Man being obsessed and making sure that Warrior knew his spots and knew what to do and knew where to be. I mean, like Savage was awesome, like really was, and his match against Flair at WrestleMania 8, a lot of people don't talk about. I mean, it was an older Flair, and Savage was older at that point too. He wasn't the same Macho.
That's one of the more lovely stories, Jess, of how a match is told in the ring, with Macho pretty much losing his limb and hopping on one foot and beating Ric Flair with right hands and getting up there and winning the title for a second time, which
that
nobody
was
expected.
all of their matches. I swear to God, like Macho, Flair and Savage's like story, even in WCW, was like, I'm gonna limp around forever, and Flair's like, that's fine. Like I'm just gonna chop you and then try to get you in figure 400 times.
But I only saw it at WrestleMania 8. That's the only time I had seen it, the first time I had seen it, and I loved the way that story was told, and it kind of took me for a swerve, because at that point we all thought, oh, Flair's just gonna retain here. There's no Macho's washed up. It doesn't make sense. Flair's on top. It's Ric Flair. It's just someone to put in the ring with Macho because he hasn't really been out there. Just put Macho out there and Flair move on to the next guy. But no. We didn't know that Flair was going to be moving on, and because of all the stuff behind with Vince, and it was kind of wild seeing Macho win for the second time, and I think it kind of adds to his legacy, because if you need to take the title off Flair, who do you have? And he's like, well, Macho is perfect, and he's sitting right here, and Vince had that confidence in Macho Man, and it tells a lot to the story and legacy of him. So. Being able to say even years later, because you're going from WrestleMania 4, you're going almost 5 years later of Macho getting the second title by Vince's calling, and that's because he was always available. He could have taken it whenever, and some people argue he didn't need it, but at that point they needed Macho Man, which was really big at WrestleMania 8. They needed him to win that title.
So Macho Man, that figure 4 out again. I would have to concede it would be over. You bet. But no, it's the Macho Man. And I go behind from the outside. Hey, no! He used the trunks. He had the man by the trunks. What the hell is going on here? What is going on? I gotta get out of here. I gotta get the Ric Flair.
So,
my low-key favorite match was Flair and Savage was WCW Great American Bash 95. Like, it was just for no reason. Like, they main evented the show, and Angelo Papa was in the front row, and it was probably one of their most physical matches, and Flair hit Savage in the face with Angelo's cane, like, to win the match.
Yeah.
And it was on Father's Day, and Angelo was in the front row, and Flair grabbed Angelo and pulled him over the rail, and Savage got all pissed off, and they had a real fun feud in WCW, actually. And Eric Bischoff said numerous times, like, at the end of 95 and beginning of 96, when we started doing house shows again, he was like, Flair and Savage started bringing crowds back because they would highlight the house shows. And he's like, so they were starting to like get more people in our house shows. And that feud with Flair and Savage at the end of 95, beginning of 96 was actually doing really well for WCW. And they fought on Nitro a ton of times, like Flair and Savage. Also at Starrcade 95, when Savage, Flair bladed, and Flair won the title back that night, but he let Macho do it. And Flair's like, it's probably one of the only time or two that I ever let somebody else blade me. Like, because we don't commonly do that. Usually we blade ourselves. But for some reason, he's like, Randy talked me in to, and I'll just blade you when I'm down there. And he's like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, so Macho was at a weird angle, and you got shit going on. Pillman, Anderson were in there or whatever. And he said he just fucking felt like a hot knife go across his thing. He's like, fuck. And then Flair was covered when he stood up or whatever. Like, and he was like, I'll never let anybody else blade me again. And Macho's like, I got you good. Like in the back or whatever. He's like, I guess I got you too deep. Like, so yeah, it's crazy. Like Randy he's one of my favorites, and I didn't even know it forever, because he was just there when I first started watching wrestling. The first major storyline was Savage and Hogan, was the Mega Powers. Like everything was, and it was so telegraphed and silly when I look back now. Of course they were going to break up. Like it's just totally building its basic storyline telling, but it was awesome.
But we had no clue at that point. Like we were so not, like, we knew wrestling wasn't, real, but we just didn't expect it coming. We didn't know it was coming in. The fact it took an entire year and the ups and downs of it was awesome. The thing I always wonder with like guys that have passed is like what they would have done or like what their legacy would have been in the last like 10 years or so, like in the world of podcasts and shoot videos and on social media, and even like getting a shot to kind of be like either elder statesman or like working backstage. Like
he was so kayfabe though. Would he have been able to come across? I wonder
because the guy, there's no one that's more kayfabe than Undertaker, and even Undertaker at some point decided, I'm done, take it off, let's make some money or let's talk about it. And I think Savage would have
threw everybody off
sooner. Yeah.
Conrad's like, let's unpack this, Macho Man. Like he's like, Hogan and I were actually best friends.
It's a good point, Craig, because if he could get over it, it's one of the major ones you would love to see tell the stories. Because Hogan tells the stories, but he just lies, so he's way down the path that we don't care about.
Macho Man was fine with everything I did, brother.
But I would love to hear. I'd love to hear true stories from Vince, and like Macho is probably pretty close to that because Macho's not gonna lie. He'll tell you what's up. He doesn't. He wouldn't care. He wouldn't have to embellish. And he would
could have been a streamer. Like who knows? Like I'd just be there's.
Just from the DDP side of the story of Macho letting him go over was such a great story, and Macho would have never told that at the time. But now, if he was still around, he could have told maybe a dozen of similar stories like that, and then dozens more, completely different. So,
and we can't do a legacy without the rap album.
Yeah, I know. Be a man, Hogan.
So fun.
It's sad. That sucks. Like it really just sucks that his career went out with anger and bitterness, and like he just desperately wanted. But it's like you want to be away from Hogan, and then he's like, "Fine." Hogan leaves, and Vince is like, "I'm still not going to let you wrestle." And he's like, "Fuck, you mean I got to go over there?" That's where he is. And then he had to call, Hulk and be like, "Can you get me in?" Like, I mean, like Bischoff wouldn't have entertained bringing Macho in anyway. But of course, he has to, march everything past Hulk because Hulk was there. Hulk was in control in WCW, and like it just fucking sucks for Randy. And he gets over there, and he's like, "Fucking whatever." yeah, you're gonna go over and whatever. Like it's fucking.
I get it.
I get it. It's my gig in life. Leave my girlfriends alone. But
again, to that point, how big he could have been without being in Hogan's shadow at some point.
Yeah, I know. I've always wondered, like, what he could have done if he was allowed to wrestle for like a full year without Hogan. I mean, technically he did when Hogan left in '92. It was him and Flair all summer or whatever. But then Vince pulled it off, both of them, and I'm going with Brett and all that stuff. So I would love to have just seen a structured from beginning to end, like year run after Hogan left with Randy. I feel
like Randy got caught in the steroid era too because they know he was probably he was probably even a bigger advocate of the juice because he was smaller and he was trying to get bigger, and I think that's what took him to the announce table. No one says that, but that's what took him over there, at those times. And you notice he got considerably smaller. So I don't know. I just if you let him get off and let him keep performing, imagine the stuff he could have done with Brett too. I mean, and that back and forth would have been amazing. I don't know. There's some
Brett
and
Sean, like there was a lot of people. He wanted to work with Sean. He wanted to work with Sean too. I think early on he said
those matches would have been superb.
Lanny Poffo said that.
Yeah, no, and I wouldn't doubt that for a minute.
My
So I
brother
just-
wanted.
my brother,
Randy wanted to wrestle Sean.
get me a frisbee. Sorry.
They had a year-long feud booked out.
So funny.
But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to talk about Macho Man for a bit, and I get to put clips in here of Macho Man and pictures, and it'll all be fine.
Yeah. No, don't forget some great stuff with Warrior too, and the try to get that scepter in there. Can you get that scepter hit on the Warrior?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's right.
Glorious.
I forgot that. It's one of my favorite moments too.
Yeah. Which was crazy because that was the career-ending match that put him in the booth, I think, after, right? I believe
No,
it
set up
was
the feud with Warrior for that. He cost the Warrior the title against Slaughter.
Right, and then so it was a career-ending match for Macho when he lost it, and literally the Warrior pinned him with his foot on his chest. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, just phenomenal
Five
stuff.
elbows. I'll never forget.
Yep. For audio fans, give us a listen Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio, or watch our videos on YouTube at Our Wrestling Channel, and check out exclusive content on Daily Motion, Our Wrestling Podcast, and on social media. You can give us a follow on Instagram or on the old Facebook at Our Wrestling Podcast. For Dave, Jess, and Craig, this is the O.W.P. signing off. Have a good one.